Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Maya LaPierre-Dreger. I'm the interim provost of CT State, and I'm going to give you an overview of the changes that have been made to the governance model since the webinar that we presented on November 10th. So I'm going to hit the highlights that have been changed. I'm not going to go through every stage of the model like we did on the 10th, but I am going to highlight the changes. We'll also go through some of the commonly asked questions, the timeline of the transition and the election process and so forth. So the first few slides here is just a recap of what we presented on the 10th. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but I just wanted to put them here as references. We have the model itself, the flow of curriculum. This particular slide illustrates what needs to go to the board for formal approval versus what stays in-house. And the quick version is pretty much anything that's related to a program, new programs, program changes, suspension, replications, etc. They all go to the board. Whereas course proposals do not. They're internal. We can make those changes without having to go to the board. And this is the detailed flow of actual curriculum process itself, the handoff between the various groups. So this has already been walked through. I can refer you back to the webinar on November 10th to get additional details. But today I'm going to focus on the changes that take place throughout this and the enhancements that have been made. So first of all, what are the changes? So let's begin at the top. Notice that there was a green box previously that's now been removed. That box was just to illustrate the fact that that's the first stage that faculty anywhere can begin curriculum. It wasn't meant to indicate that that was a formal part of the governance process. That all happens prior to governance beginning. So that can, faculty can dialogue with each other, with an industry partner, what have you. And then they would work with a department chair or program coordinator or what have you to bring that curriculum into a formal proposal and start the actual governance process. So basically here, we simply remove the green box from the top around the faculty, but the rest of it is the same there. So the next piece are the statewide discipline councils. There are a lot of things that were sent to us, a lot of feedback for places to adjust, places to align, to streamline, and we've made those. I'm going to show them on the next slide. But there were a couple of questions that were asked about the actual established groups like CMAC and CSET and C3 BIOS and how they work in the future. So just to clarify, these groups often have members that are not part of the community college governance structure. So there might be members from university partners, four-year colleges, transfer institutions, industry partners, advisory board members, etc., which is great. But those folks are not part of the formal governance of CT State. So these SDC bodies will be the formal governance bodies, but those other groups like, let's say, College of Technology, they will still function and they'll provide feedback to the applicable SDCs related to programs that they're working on or providing any guidance on. Like College of Technology will have things related to data science, which is in a different school than, let's say, engineering technologies. So that's where, as you go through, these groups can still function. They just won't serve as the formal governance bodies. So these are the changes that actually were made to the SDCs. There were quite a lot of them in terms of the titles of the groups. I also want to point out that we went from 42 potential SDCs that were being considered down to 29. That was primarily done because we had a number of concerns from smaller campuses that said, listen, we don't even have 42 faculty. In some campuses, there's less than 30 faculty. And they were concerned about whether or not they'd be able to have ample representation on all the applicable groups that they need. So just as a reminder, these groups are the different buckets of groups that will be responsible for ensuring that program proposals are aligned. So there are still program coordinators on campuses that are responsible for doing the lion's share of curriculum development work locally and working with their peers across the colleges, across the campuses. But it's important to note that these folks in these groups will be doing the work of looking to make sure that things related to statewide alignment of those programs are all taken care of. So each of these will have one rep per campus from the colleges that have that type of programming. So for example, in nursing or something like that, not every campus has a nursing program. So therefore, not every campus would have a rep on the nursing body. So as you can see, there are 29 groups. And the names in some of the groups, like the health careers, they say group 1, 2, 3, 4, for example, for health careers. Those groups may decide at a future date they want a better title for their group, which is fine. These are the initial names to help distinguish them. The other thing I do want to point out here is that the health information technology, the entire group, the programming and the faculty within those groups are now going to be moved from the School of Business and Hospitality to the School of Nursing and Health Careers. This was something we heard loud and clear that people felt very strongly that had been situated in the wrong school. So it has been moved to nursing and health careers. I do want to point out, though, there are still some things like under the business office technology bucket where there are something like electronic health records, for example. They're still under BOT because they are, in fact, BOT programs. Okay, the next change I'd like to highlight, and this actually isn't even really a change, this is just a clarification. So there were a lot of questions about the alignment feedback period when SDCs, when the Statewide Discipline Council gets a proposal and they start to do the work and they say, okay, we're going to start aligning this, and they have an initial draft proposal that they want campuses to take a look at and start getting feedback from. They send that to the campus for an alignment period. An alignment feedback period. So what was not clear was that the campus department, obviously, if this is, let's say, a theater proposal, they're going to send that to the Arts and Humanities department on the campus for their feedback. But let's say there's something in there like a math course that is also going to be edited or changed or proposed in the changes. Well, the science and math department may have a thought or input on that as well. So that is entirely okay. It's possible for those other departments to also provide feedback during that feedback period. What's really new here, though, is the fact that there has been continued and I think productive discussions around the notion of some campuses feel strongly that they would like to continue to have local curriculum bodies. Now, just to be clear, these are not bodies that would be part of the formal governance structure. They're not part of the statewide structure. They're not part of the actual voting portion of governance. But if campuses want to still have a local body that provides interdisciplinary dialogue around programs, that's fine. That's entirely fine. But that would be feedback that would have to be gathered during that same feedback period. And same thing, questions were asked, can Senate bodies at campuses look at curriculum and provide feedback? That may be something that campus wants to do, but again, it's feedback. They're not votes on the curriculum. The only votes that the campuses would have is the vote prior to the school of area. When things get forwarded to the next level, notice the name has changed. It was formerly called the PAC. It's now called the SAC, just to clarify, it's the school, not the program area. But the campuses, once the feedback period is done and curriculum goes back to an SDC and they finish their alignment work, once they get to that point where they say, okay, this is ready, we think it's ready to move forward for formal approval, and they'll forward it to the SAC, they also forward it back to the campuses. At that point, that's when campus academic departments vote to recommend approval or revisions. And their representatives from that campus would bring that recommendation to the SAC for the SAC to do their work and actually cast the formal vote. So that's where, if campuses have a local curriculum body or a campus Senate body that wants to review or provide feedback on curriculum, it's during the feedback period that they would have that opportunity. So another point of clarification was around the academic departments. And so I mentioned this in a previous webinar, but just to make sure people are clear on it, academic departments do need to align to the schools of CTC. Now, most campuses that the departments are very closely aligned already, but some do have a bit of work to do to get them closer. We understand some campuses are small and you may want to combine departments. So let's say science and technology, let's say science, math, engineering, and technology. You don't have enough to have multiple departments, but you want to combine them into one. That's fine. Just know that your college, your campus will still need one rep for this SAC for science and math and one rep for the SAC for technology and engineering. On the flip side, if you had a larger campus that said, listen, we have so many faculty, it's too big to have one science and math department, and you decide to have a separate science and a separate math department, well, that campus would still only have one rep on the science and math SAC for the school. So you just need to make sure that internally on your campuses, you navigate who those reps will be. That way you can facilitate your local needs for academic departments, but also facilitate the state needs for the governance structure. I mentioned this previously, but this is just to illustrate it visually. The School Area Curriculum Committee is the new name for what was formerly called the PAC. The PAC was called the Program Area Curriculum Committee. That, again, that name program area was sort of a carryover from when we had the original thinking in the organizational structure for CT State would had 6 program areas for CT State. And obviously over time we changed that. We're now calling them the School of Arts and Humanities and the School of Business and Technology. And so naturally it makes sense to just correct the name here as well. So that is now the SAC, just to avoid further confusion. Now there's a couple of additional changes that have happened in terms of the membership of Congress and Senate. So the first one, Congress, they're minor changes, but just for clarification. So first of all, the staff field, it previously said CCP, 6 voting CCP members, 1 for advising, registration, library, etc. But it wasn't clear that these could be any staff, not just, they may or may not only be CCP. So we wanted to make sure that that was clear because we had a number of folks across the state that sent us feedback over the past couple of weeks saying, listen, we are unionized employees, we're part of CT State, but we're not affiliated with a specific campus. Where are we in the governance structure? So where is our representation? And so just to make sure it's clear, in Congress, this is where we have these staff positions that could potentially be individuals not affiliated with the campus, obviously at large or non-management staff. The other clarification made here was around students. And so students previously were supposed to be selected 1 from each region. But of course, if we're no longer using regions in the CT State organizational structure, then it makes sense to switch this to students from each group of small, medium, and large campuses instead. And we'll work with student government associations in the spring for them to conduct their elections. So when Congress and Senate get underway in the spring, in the first months, students may not be on those bodies just yet. They may join a little bit later once their membership is selected. Likewise, in the Senate, same change for students, just making them small, medium, and large. But there is a substantive change to the membership in Senate. And this is where previously Senate structure was entirely comprised of representatives from the 12 campuses and students. That's it. And so this was pointed out by several individuals that those folks that are staff, they're union staff, but they're not affiliated with a specific campus, did not have an opportunity to participate in Senate. And so that's where 2 positions have been added, 1 for a staff member, a professional classified staff not affiliated with a campus, and 1 for a non-management at large. This is the illustration of the formal model with the changes incorporated. And so you can see in the top right-hand corner, that's just the representation that's been changed. And in the middle on the left, you can see where we've added in for clarification, the optional campus input during the STC curriculum alignment feedback period. And again, this could be from academic departments, from local curriculum bodies, or campus senates, depending on how your campus wants to operate internally. But just to be clear, there is no expectation that campuses maintain any sort of local curriculum body. In fact, remember, because we are a single institution statewide, all curriculum must be managed statewide. It's no longer managed locally. So having local curriculum bodies in some cases is sort of an extra step that some campuses really don't want to pursue it. But other campuses feel strongly that they do. So those opportunities are there, but just know that they're informational. All right, so that's a summary of the changes to the model. So I want to walk you through where we are, what the next steps are, going through the election process, and where you can find more answers to any questions you still have. So first are the FAQs. There's an extensive list of FAQs we've put together based on feedback over the last couple of weeks. It can be found at ctstate.edu/governance. That's actually a new website we're launching. It's going to have all of the information I'm presenting today, as well as a lot of other stuff broken down into smaller pieces that you can download at your leisure. The feedback on the FAQ is organized alphabetically by theme. There's no special magic behind it there, but you can find the information in alphabetical order. Governance timelines and schedules. So I want to walk you through what this is going to look like. So first of all, you've seen this slide. This I showed you in the November 10th webinar. This is basically laying out where we are in the transition timeline. So November 30th, we said we would have the governance model finalized. And now we're moving into the elections. So nominations need to take place and be submitted by December 9th. And then elections need to be completed by the end of the semester, December 23rd. And then governance bodies need to get underway and start doing their bylaws right away in January and February, so that they're operational through March. And I'm going to show you visually in a minute why that's so important. I know some folks said, well, what's the rush? Can't we just wait till the spring? But we really can't, and I'll illustrate that in a moment. So this is just a sort of a visual representation of the year. So September and October, as a reminder, we did not start elections for governance because the governance structure was put on pause as a result of the impact bargaining that was happening with the unions around department chairs, and the request to return back to campus-based departments instead of statewide. That has significant implications on how governance works. And so we paused the governance until we figured out the academic department piece. And then meanwhile, Dr. Maduco, our new president of CT State, also had his campus visits and really wanted to hear the feedback from campuses before making any decisions on the model or academic departments and many other things. So that brings us to November, where we did the webinar on the revised model based on the changes to the academic departments. And then we gathered feedback, and now we're here today to kind of give you the overview of the changes that have since been incorporated, and we're going to transition to the election period. In the spring, we're going to stand up these bodies. The curriculum and the Senate do need to establish formal bylaws, whereas the SDCs and the SACs, they're going to use Robert's Rules of Orders, and they don't need to have as formal a bylaw structure. And there's also a number of curriculum items that are actually sort of sitting on a shelf ready to go that were already aligned in the past last spring as part of the APRC process, but they did not get done their work in time to take them through the governance bodies for CT State that were set up transitionally. That was the SFASA and the CCIC and whatnot. So those have already been sunset. So there's a number of aligned curriculum proposals that have already been aligned, and they're just awaiting approval. And so some of these things we can jump right into and get them into the pipeline rather than being brand new proposals. The other thing too is that the catalog will be formally published in March of 23. We have a transitional catalog that's already out and available, but there's some things not included. There's policies that are still being edited and revised. There's curriculum still being worked on. And so we're going to get as much as we can into there on March of 23. And then we'll do an addendum in June to kind of capture anything else that was addressed during the later spring months. So this is a really important slide for you to unpack. And so this is the cycle of governance every month of how meetings are going to have to work in order for this all to click together. And so I know some campuses traditionally, for example, you might have your academic department meetings in the first week of every month or other times, but it's imperative that we have a structure where we have your campus-based meetings being taking place in step and in sequence with the statewide meetings. So therefore, councils where curriculum is being addressed statewide are able to get the feedback they need from campuses in the proper sequence without holding up the process every month. So every week, the first week of every month is when the SDC meetings will take place. Again, there are those 29 councils. They will be doing their work. By the way, all statewide governance meetings will take place on Fridays. Friday mornings will be curriculum related meetings, and Friday afternoon, the third week of the month, will be Senate. I know this isn't ideal for everybody, but there's always going to be at least some moment in every week where somebody is going to be inconvenienced. And it really did land on Friday morning being the least disruptive for the most individuals. We do know some folks have classes on Friday morning, and there were requests to move the curriculum meetings to Friday afternoons, but we did feel that having 3 Friday afternoons of every week tied up with statewide curriculum meetings probably would not be as appealing as only having 1 Friday afternoon for College Senate 1 week of the month. So nonetheless, first week of the month on Friday mornings would be the statewide discipline councils. Then the second week of the month, between Mondays and Thursdays, somewhere in the week, just not Friday, campuses would need to have their academic department meetings. The Friday of that second week would be the SACs. So the statewide school area curriculum committees for each school would take place. In the third week, campuses would have their local Senate meetings. And if a campus has an optional curriculum body, they may choose to meet here, or they might choose to put that into the flex week the following week. But the bottom line is you need to have those meetings take place. The campus Senate meeting needs to take place before the college Senate meeting that Friday, the Friday afternoon of the third week. And any curriculum work would need to be resolved in time for the SDC the following month. So if a campus does have an optional curriculum body that they want to continue to convene, they might have either the third or the fourth week of the month where they can have that take place and still get feedback to the SDC in time. And of course, Congress is the other item that has to happen on Friday afternoons, on Fridays of the third week. So curriculum would happen in the morning and Senate would happen in the afternoon. So what does this look like in terms of dates? So this is the tentative, although pretty dialed in. I doubt that these dates will change, but this is the spring 2023 meeting schedule for all these governance bodies. So you'll notice that in January, most of them are not going to have meetings because during the first and second week of January, we're still in winter break. But we do get to the third week of January, and that is the start of classes. Now, I understand that Friday the 20th is the first day of classes, but we did feel it's important that Senate and Congress do still convene on that first Friday, that first Friday of the cycle in January. So it's the third Friday of the month. The reason for that is because Congress and Senate do need to establish bylaws, and that will likely take them a little bit of time. And if we don't get them started until the end of February, that can hold up everything from getting any curriculum through. And then this whole thing is not going to benefit us at all. The purpose of this is to get curriculum approved in time for the board meetings that end in June and get them into our catalog for the fall. So let's go through an example to better understand what this means. So first of all, I showed you this slide before, but just as a reminder, the board policy requires anything related to programs come to them for approval as well, and courses do not. So if we were to look at just a sequence for a program approval, this is a snapshot of what it would look like. Now, this is optimistic because this is assuming we have a program that has no hiccups and it can sail through the process, if you will, without having to have pauses and repeats and sort of taking a month in between and getting additional feedback. So let's say, for example, we have that curriculum that's already been aligned. It's sitting in a hopper waiting to get approval, but this was aligned in the spring by the APRC groups that were formed. They did all the heavy lifting. They just didn't get it done in time. So if we have an initial draft of a program proposal that we're going to submit to an SDC, and let's say the SDC has their February 3rd meeting, that's that the first Friday of February. So the SDC meets, they decide it's ready to go, it's been aligned. However, let's say even if they don't think it's aligned and they just want to get campus feedback, that they would then send it the following week to the campuses. So that Monday through Thursday, campus department meetings department meetings during the week would meet. And then that feedback and that whole feedback loop period would have until Friday the 3rd of the next month, so March 3rd, to get feedback back to the SDC. At that point, the SDC then confirms they're done with their alignment work, the feedback's been incorporated, and they're ready to forward it to the SAC. So on the 3rd, they forward it to the SAC, but it also gets forwarded back to the campuses. And at this point, that's the cycle, that week of March 3rd through 9th, that's where the campus academic departments would vote to recommend approval or additional revisions, and their campus representative would bring that recommendation to the SAC meeting on Friday the 10th. So in that SAC meeting on Friday the 10th, if you had something where all the representatives said our campus is comfortable with this, we think it's good to go, they vote to approve, and it just moved forward to Congress the following Friday the 24th. If for some reason the SAC said, no, we don't have consensus, it needs to go back to the SDC, there's a 1-month period that would then add where it would go back to the SDC and then come back to this process the following month. But assuming that there weren't any hiccups, this process would take 6 to 7 weeks. I say 6 to 7 because the schedule in the spring, in the month of March, there's a spring break in there. And so that third Friday had a spring break. So this got pushed to the fourth Friday for Curriculum Congress. So in this case, this example is a 7-week sequence, but you could potentially have a 6-week sequence. Or let's say, for example, we have some of the curriculum that has already been approved by our APRC groups in the spring, but didn't go through the formal governance process. Then we could potentially expedite those particular ones just for the sake of the alignment and getting them into the catalog for CT State and jump right to, Friday the 3rd of March, they start it and then go through the process without the loop, or they can even start it on Friday the 2nd of February. So I also want to illustrate what happens once it's done with CT State governance. So regardless of what our steps are internally, there are always additional steps once we leave this and it goes to the board. So as the provost office or your academic deans and your campuses know, anytime there's a curriculum proposal coming out of a campus, it leaves the provost or your dean's office and it gets submitted to the academic council for system office. So the deadlines for that are 2 weeks prior to the meetings. So in the spring, and by the way, the BOR has not published their dates yet for the spring meetings. So the dates that I'm showing here are tentative based on what the dates were this past year. So these are estimates on the dates. They're subject to change, but I think they're going to be pretty close. So anyhow, in April, we would have until March 29th would be the deadline for any curriculum to be submitted to the academic council for the system office in order for it to make it through the process to get to the board's final meeting in May. And so basically the steps are there's an academic council meeting followed by the academic and student affairs subcommittee meeting of the board, followed by the full board meeting where the curriculum is usually a consent agenda item by that point. Likewise, in May, there's one more cycle. If we get curriculum out of CT State, I have April 26th is the deadline to submit anything in order for it to make it to the board's meeting in June. So there's a lot that happens once it leaves CT State. And this is why it's so critical that we stand up governance and get our elections done now. Because if we wait until the spring, we're not going to be able to get anything done if we're not even starting elections until late January and February, and then March, possibly getting things up and running for bylaws. And you're never really going to get curriculum through a process in time for us to get anything to the board. And then the whole thing is moot anyway, and we won't have any changes we can put into our catalog for the fall. This is just a quick illustration. If we needed an extra month at that SAC level of campuses on that Friday, March 10th date, decided that they did not agree and they wanted to go back to campuses and work with the SDCs to get additional revisions, it would add a month to the process, and in which case we'd only have the one date to submit in May. Likewise, with course proposals, we do not have any board approval needed. So we have a little bit more flexibility. If campuses have courses they'd like to propose, we can pretty much go through the governance structure right up through the end of the academic year and still be able to get them into our catalog. All right, so just to recap the final model after incorporating the feedback, we've got, these are the same slides, just with the yellow highlights removed. This illustrates the process of your curriculum coming through your discipline councils and academic departments, getting your optional feedback from various groups on campus, coming through the SAC, and then going up through Congress. And likewise, your policy non-curriculum issues are running through the Senate side of the governance structure as well. This is just a recap of the cycle that I showed you and the other slides that illustrate the handoff process. So the last piece I want to go through is the nomination and election process for this fall, how we're going to conduct this. Again, nominations need to be submitted by December 9th and elections completed by the end of the semester. So let's start on each campus. So each campus, based on the slides I showed you previously, each campus needs to conduct elections for their statewide discipline council representatives. These are full-time faculty. Their representatives for the SACs. These are also full-time faculty. And their representatives for the CT State Senate, where they have a full-time faculty, a full-time staff. Excuse me, staff. Sorry about that. So it's full-time faculty, full-time staff, and an at-large for their Senate. So on each campus, the nomination and election process will be determined by the campus themselves. Each campus has processes they've used before. We're not going to upset that. You can continue to use whatever process works. We did meet again on November 30th. Dr. Maduco met with the Senate and the governance leaders on each campus. We met in person at Central Connecticut State University. There were a few folks that met that couldn't make it in person and came online. But we walked through this information with your representatives. We discussed the nomination process so they're aware of it. They will be working on your campuses to help facilitate the elections that are going to take place. But again, nominations need to be submitted by December 9th, and then your elections completed by the 23rd. And then the names of your elected representatives will get forwarded to your CEOs for informational purposes. They'll get the information to us. In terms of the statewide elections, remember for the Congress, where you have full-time faculty members from the different schools. Now, just to clarify, some people had questions about how come there are not campus representatives on Curriculum Congress. Let me just clarify. The feedback that we got was some people said, hey, can we have campus representation, one faculty from each campus on Congress? And we thought about it. And we realized that the change would be very substantive, and it's something that needs to be discussed by Congress itself. So that's something Congress can think about in the future, but I just want to illustrate why this is challenging. Congress has 33 representatives. If we added 12 more, that would bring us up to 45. Now, we can figure out a size issue, but it's more about the composition that becomes a problem. Because Congress is made up of representatives from each school. So for example, right now, it's 4 full-time faculty from Arts and Humanities statewide, 4 full-time from Science and Math statewide, etc. So altogether, there are 24 faculty, 4 from each school. That's a balanced representation of discipline areas. If you have then on top of that 12 campus reps, let's say for sake of argument, by coincidence, all 12 campuses happen to select someone from Arts and Humanities. Well, now you can potentially have a situation where you have 16 representatives of Arts and Humanities, 12 from the campus and 4 that were elected statewide, and only 4 from each of the other schools. It becomes a very lopsided Congress in terms of representation of the curriculum. So it's not as easily resolved as one might think. So we did not make that change here, and that's something that we recommend that Congress can consider in the future. And if they decide they want to change their composition in some way, that's fine. But until then, Congress will continue to be set up the way it was originally designed, where it's 4 reps statewide from each school. So faculty will nominate themselves. It'll only be self-nominations for the statewide elections. The reason for that is we just don't want to run the risk that we have folks that are nominated and have no idea they've been nominated. So if a campus says, we'd like to nominate someone, well, great. Give that someone a call and let them know you want them to be nominated and have them fill out a self-nomination form. So that's the Curriculum Congress. There are also those 6 staff representatives, the library, advising, etc. So there will be a nomination form that people can self-nominate for those staff positions. And then likewise on the CT State Senate, the only 2 positions on the CT State Senate that need a statewide election process are the ones for those staff not affiliated with a specific campus. And so in both cases, there's nomination forms for self-nomination that are on the ctstate.edu/governance page. They can be submitted by December 9th. And then the way the elections will take place, they will be facilitated via anonymous SurveyMonkey voting ballots. They'll be mailed or emailed to each constituent group. So for example, if you're a faculty in the Arts and Humanities School of CT State and you're full-time, the elections, the voting members will be full-time faculty and full-time staff. All the full-time faculty in the Arts and Humanities School across the state will receive a ballot of all the nominees that have self-nominated in the School of Arts and Humanities, and then they can elect in their 4. In terms of the staff, those ballots will be sent to the staff across the state, and likewise for the staff not affiliated with campus. And so the voting will be sent out, those ballots will be sent out sometime after December 9th, and then the voting will start on December 14th, and it will close on December 23rd. So it does take a little bit of time to build the ballots once the nominations come in. That's why there's a little bit of a delay there. In terms of the SGA, any student representatives for the statewide elections, they will be facilitated in partnership with the SGA leaders in the spring. So again, go to the CT State ctstate.edu/governance page. You'll find the self-nominations for the election process. You'll also find a copy of this presentation. You'll find smaller pieces from within this presentation, smaller handouts that you can pull out. There's also information there about recommended additional responsibilities and release time for folks. Just to clarify, the recommended AR and RT, if someone is a full-time faculty who's eligible for AR, it must be used as AR. The RT, the release time, is only for those folks 2017 and beyond who are not eligible for AR would be able to have comparable release time. So just make sure that that's clear, but the information is there. And also to be clear, the recommended AR and RT times that we are going to be supporting financially for the next year and a half will only be for the spring of 2023 and the next academic year. And at that point, the governance models, by that point, there may be changes, there may be revisions that the governance structures have made for themselves, and we'll be reviewing it at that time. Okay, so I hope this information was helpful for you. Again, this information is available to download. Please get yourself out there if you're interested in being part of these governance bodies. It's really important that we stand this up. More importantly, once governance is functional, all these decisions will be made by the governance members themselves, and I'm really looking forward to that day. So in the meantime, have a great day, and I hope this information was helpful.